Let me be very clear. Our objective was to conduct a full and thorough examination of the evidence obtained from the federal government before any additional investigative steps were taken, and certainly before any conclusions were drawn. This process was to be conducted irrespective of any pressure to come to a quick conclusion. Not in this investigation or any other do we sacrifice completeness for speed. Our investigation has concluded that Officers Lake and Salamone attempted to make a lawful arrest of Alton Sterling based upon probable cause. During that encounter, Mr. Sterling continued to resist the officers' efforts to arrest him. The officers used verbal commands of varying degrees and tried to control Mr. Sterling with several lethal techniques. Toxicology reports showed the presence of several scheduled and illegal drugs in Mr. Sterling's system at the time of the incident. Considering this, it is reasonable that Mr. Sterling was under the influence, and that contributed to his non-compliance. Throughout the encounter, the officers attempted several non-lethal techniques to gain compliance and control of Mr. Sterling's hands. Their efforts to do so were a direct result of the information relayed to them by the Baton Rouge Police Department dispatcher. That was that Mr. Sterling was armed with a firearm. Therefore, their attempt to gain control of Mr. Sterling's hands were well-founded and reasonable under the circumstances and under Louisiana law. Furthermore, the officers concerned that he was armed and dangerous was in fact subsequently verified and correct. The seminal question presented is whether Officers Howie Lake and Blaine Salamone can be held criminally responsible for the death of Alton Sterling under applicable laws of the state of Louisiana. Our job was not to determine whether the Baton Rouge Police Department's policy was followed or if certain tactics or language was more appropriate than others. After a thorough and exhaustive review of the evidence, the facts that can be established beyond a reasonable doubt, the law and jurisprudence of the state of Louisiana, and the obligations of prosecutors under the Code of Professional Conduct, the Louisiana Department of Justice cannot proceed with a prosecution of either Officer Lake or Officer Salamone.